Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar conversation. We are going to get started in just about 1 minute. Okay, I'm showing 2 o'clock Eastern time, so I'm going to go ahead and call our conversation to order today. I'm Patricia Julianell. I'm the Senior Strategist for Program Advancement and Legal Affairs at Schoolhouse Connection. I have here with me Jordann Lankford, and I'm going to have Jordann introduce herself in just 1 second. Before we jump in, though, I want to let you all know a couple of things. If you haven't participated in these conversations before, I just want to let you know there is no PowerPoint or presentation or any kind of handouts. This is just going to be a conversation with all of us. You will have the opportunity to ask questions, so please feel free to type questions into the questions pane at any time, and we'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. We will be posting a recording of this on our website, so you can watch again or share it with colleagues. And the last thing before we get started is I do want to ask for everybody's help with something. I'm putting into the chat box some information. We are, particularly with the dissemination of all of those American Rescue Plan funds that are going out to states really right now, and hopefully going out to school districts and schools very soon. We are looking to elevate some of the stories of what you're seeing in your communities, what are the challenges you're seeing, and how are you addressing those challenges? And we want to use that to promote, obviously, best practices, but also the best uses for some of these federal funds. So we have made it easy. We've created a really short Google form. I put the link in the chat box. If you have, even 3 minutes to jump into that Google form and really quickly put in some information, we'd love to hear what you're doing and what you're seeing. And we promise that we will never use any of your stories or any of your information without asking you first. So you don't have to worry about all of a sudden, seeing your name on our website or in a newspaper and you didn't even know we were going to do it. But if you do have a couple of minutes, we'd love to have your help. Just pop into that link in the chat. But now, without any further ado, I want to jump in and start our conversation with Jordann. I'm thrilled to have Jordann here with us today. She is actually an award-winning educator. We're very fortunate to have her. So, Jordann, I know I embarrassed you. I'm sorry. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about where you work and what you do.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Jordann Lankford Forster. I am Aani and Anishinaabe. That means those names in English mean Chippewa and Grovant. Those are the two tribes that I am affiliated with. My Aani name is Bright Trail Woman. I am from Great Falls, Montana, and I do a couple of things for our district. The most important part is that I run a dropout prevention program for American Indian students here in Great Falls, Montana. And then another piece of that is I do some advocacy work concerning acting as somewhat of a liaison between families and the school. And I also instructionally coach other educators in how to incorporate Indian education content into their classroom.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordann. We're so happy to have you with us and have your perspective today. I'm going to jump into my questions that I always ask. First thing I want to talk about is this really, I'm going to say tragedy of just kind of missing students, that since schools closed, school buildings closed and went to distance learning over a year ago, so many students have just not connected. They've really just kind of disappeared. And I know you've seen that in your community too. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing to try to reach out to find these students and families and to get them back connected with school again.
Yeah, so I know it's different in other states as far as closures and openings and stuff. We did close down last year in March. And then at the beginning of this year, we reopened, but students had the option to go remote, face-to-face, or also there was a hybrid option as well. As cases have started to decrease in Montana, we've seen students returning more often than not. But, you know, it's difficult for everybody. And I just want to acknowledge everyone who's on this call and acknowledge everyone's dedication to this work and, you know, trying to find ways to help our kids. But it was really, really devastating because with the dropout prevention program that I run, I'm already working with students who are feeling very disconnected from school. We try to incorporate Indian education as much as we can into the classroom content to try to engage them and make material meaningful and relevant. And then we had this, you know, closure, and it's been very difficult. So I think the most important part is just to keep that door open to students, and something that we really I think that COVID in some cases, I guess I shouldn't say some cases, the only positive that I've gotten from COVID is that it's allowed other educators to see disparities in equity. And so I think before last year, it didn't occur to quite a few educators that students didn't have access to the internet. Their living conditions and their basic needs was really brought to the surface. And so for that, I'm grateful, just because I think it allowed other educators to really understand those equity discrepancies. But I think it's really just keeping that door open. And what a lot of educators found out when we closed down is that students have so many things going on just day to day, their basic stuff, that schoolwork isn't always the most important thing that they have to do that day. A lot of our students are trying to figure out where they're going to sleep or where they're going to get their next meal from. And so when you keep that door open and allow them to not constantly be in trouble because they didn't get your work done, but if you're just, you know, making that connection and still visiting their houses and dropping off food baskets or dropping off things that they might need day to day, hygiene materials, things like that, and just letting them know that you're still there for them and keeping the door open in that way and providing that safe space. I had permission to share this story with one of my students from last year, but I went and picked up her homework one day, and the police were out in front of her house and they were doing a welfare check on her, and she handed me her math homework through her bedroom window. And it's just a really important reminder that students have other things going on. And I know that it's frustrating, but sometimes the homework or the schoolwork that you have to give them just isn't the most important thing that they have to deal with.
Yeah, you know, it makes me think, you talking about going out and delivering food or delivering other supplies, even if that student's not coming to school, it just shows that you still care about them. You care about them as a human being and not just as a student.
Absolutely. And it's not like we, or I personally, get paid any more money if a student graduates high school. Like it's still part of the job. And when it comes down to it, I care way more about a student having food than whether or not my ego is going to be hurt because they didn't turn in their assignment for me.
That's pretty powerful. So let me ask you, because I know that you have a lot of expertise on this. You said keeping the door open. What are some of the strategies that you use? The door's open. How do you get them through it? How do you draw them back in and keep them in when you know they have other things on their plate and other priorities that they are trying to deal with?
Absolutely. I think that it's kind of a pattern to even in a normal school year when a student misses school, it's just this overwhelming dread of coming back to school and a teacher placing, you know, a stack of homework on their desk. And so it's really about slowly easing them back into their work, kind of like, you know, one bite at a time. So just giving them a little bit of work that's accomplishable that they can do. And really not being super, it might sound like it's lowering the bar, but it's really not. It's just finding a new way for those students to meet the bar. So, you know, they not being so nitpicky about whether or not they finish an essay perfectly. They turn in an essay and it's not exactly what you want, but you say, good job, that's awesome, that's great, I really appreciate you doing that. You know, and just really not overwhelming them, because that's a very human thing too. Like when you think you're going to get in trouble, you get like head shy, right? Or you don't want to call that person back because you're like, they're just going to tell me what I did wrong. And I think it's just really important to focus on, and outside of this year, always what kids are doing right.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that what you said. It's not about lowering the bar, it's about providing a different way for them to meet the bar or alternative ways for them to meet the bar. I like that a lot. And that kind of
So
gets me to my next question, which is about attendance. And I know attendance has been really difficult this year, particularly in distance learning, but also in in-person learning. And again, not wanting to lower that bar of attendance, but just flexibility in how that's calculated, and what kinds of consequences are in place if students can't make it to every virtual lesson or can't make it in person. So how are you all doing anything different in terms of calculating and recognizing attendance this year than in other years?
right, so students are required to check in twice a day. So even though they might not be able to make it in, and this is a regular school year too, they're required to check in twice a day. And even though they're not making it in person through that check-in, it's really just to make sure that they're okay. Um, you know, and so don't tell them that. Don't, hopefully the students aren't watching this. I'm sure that they're not, but it's really for us to just know that they're okay and they're still around, and um, so check-ins twice a day, morning and then afternoon, and they just let us know, if they're not going to make it in, what they're at home working on, and just making sure that, they don't need anything. If they need anything, we do the drop off, take it to their houses, stuff like that. Actually, last year when we closed down, I wrote 3 different grants that I happened to get through a local organization, and with that grant money, we purchased a cow that, it wasn't alive. It was already a deceased cow, but we had that meat process, and that's something that we used to deliver to students. So we actually bought a cow and 3 pigs that we had
Wow,
processed and taken to the students. Yeah,
you got me, Jordan.
Montana
That's a
stuff.
new one.
So that's
That's
what's
a new
up.
one.
Yep.
I haven't heard of that one before, so you got me there. That's great. Great. Now, I want to kind of go back to something you said at the beginning. You were talking about how this year you feel like educators have become more aware of some of the basic needs of students and the housing issues that students are facing, more aware than ever before. And so I kind of want to circle back to that about who are key partners within your school and your district, as well as in the community, that have helped you, find your McKinney-Vento students, engage them, help provide them what they need in their basic needs. Who's helping you do your job, basically?
I would say this year, everybody. So normally we have 2 homeless liaisons that work with families in our district. We have 2 that coordinate housing and ships that teachers are building with students, because a lot of times students don't recognize, as silly as it sounds, they don't recognize that they actually qualify as homeless, because they think, well, I have a place to stay. I'm not, they think of like homelessness as living outside, like in a box or something from a movie. And they don't understand that once you actually have more than 7 people living in a 2-bedroom house, that you qualify for these services. Like, but they don't like that because of the stigma, right? And parents don't like to report things like that because they're worried that their kids are going to get taken away, or something like that. So really, it comes down to other educators. It's a team. It's not just me doing this work. It's really a team, and building those relationships and allowing that space for students to trust you enough that they'll tell you what's going on, not in a way that they're going to be punished, but in a way that their needs are going to be met.
Yeah, I like that, allowing, it's kind of an interesting way, the way you phrased it, allowing that space for families and youth to know that this is about helping them. It's not an accusation, it's not a judgment.
Absolutely.
Um, so I have one more question for you. So I want to remind everybody who's listening, please feel free to type your questions into the questions pane for Jordann. I'm going to be reading questions out. So anything that you have at all for her related to dropout prevention, engaging students, finding students, identifying them, feel free to drop those questions in. But I want to talk to you now. We're at the end of April. School year is going to be ending soon. So I'm sure you're already thinking about next year. And as you look forward to next year, I want to hear from you about what you're afraid of. What are you worried about? I'm sure you have a lot of worries in any school year, but particularly for this year, what are you most concerned about? And what strategies are you already putting in place to try to address some of those fears and worries?
Absolutely. So I think the most common fear amongst educators is probably how behind our students are going to be. They're going to be behind. And so in my program anyways, we do a lot of remedial work because it's a dropout prevention program, and students, when they get to me, they've already missed a lot of school. And so I think it's really not being afraid to use those. I don't want to say remedial as in like a negative way. I want to say, like, with any student at any point in time, if they walk into your room and even though they're a junior and they're not reading at a junior level, don't be afraid to hand them a freshman level or a sophomore level, or in some cases an 8th grade level material, because it's just where they're at. It's going to do them absolutely no good. They're just going to be frustrated, overwhelmed. Give them those accomplishables that is not lowering the bar, but it's meeting them where they are at that time, so we can get them to the level that they need to be. Right? It's going to do them absolutely no good to read a book that they don't understand the words in it. That makes no sense. Give them something that they can connect to, that they understand, that applies to them, and then that's where you see the growth and improvement, right? Like, we don't teach kindergartners calculus. Why don't we do that? Because that's just not where they're at right now, and that's okay. And this is a democracy. We live in this country, and we should know by now that everybody's not in the same place at the same time on the same day. Not everybody's at the same level, and that's okay.
So let me ask you, are there specific tools, specific books, specific websites, specific tools that your district maybe has available to help students catch up to whatever level, they need to be at in order to graduate, let's say?
Absolutely. So with some of our COVID relief money, we've shifted teachers' job responsibility or their duty days. So we have teachers that are solely remote workers. So they're checking in with those students every day, providing a lot of one-on-one help for those students who just aren't able to talk to their teacher like they used to, right? They're not able to raise their hand and ask the question at the time. So we have allocated some of that funds to provide tutors, if you will. So it's the educators that we already had working in our district, but now they're able to spend more of their time as a one-on-one tutor, which I think is really helpful to a child. And it's just like, it makes you feel special, right? You just have the teacher all to yourself. So we have a lot of that. We've kind of shifted our schedule to, in the buildings it looks a little bit different, but we've shifted it to a block schedule, so similar to a college university schedule, so you don't have all 7 periods in one day. Now we've shifted to about 3 or 4 classes a day, which gives them extra time in that room, and it's extended those hours too, if that makes sense. So like 3 or 4 classes a day now, instead of 50-minute class, now it's about an hour and a half. So students are able to hang out, and teachers get to spend a little bit more time with them, making sure that kiddos are getting caught up.
That's a great idea. That's a really cool idea. And are you all doing anything over the summer? That's kind of my first part of the question. And then my second part of the question is what are you doing to make sure that your students experiencing homelessness will be able to take advantage of whatever is happening in the summer?
Absolutely. So I was bummed. My students actually really like summer session. We call it summer session. We don't call it summer school, because summer school sounds like, you got in trouble. And even if you did get in trouble, that's okay. We're still going to call it summer session because that sounds fun. It sounds more collegiate. It sounds like something you want to be there for. But so we had folks get vaccinated, and those folks that are fully vaccinated are going to be our drivers. So they're going to provide transportation to our students. We're still masks and everything like that while in the vehicle, but we're the ones that are fully vaccinated will be providing transportation. We're using our COVID relief money to also still provide lunch throughout the summertime to all students, not just the summer session kiddos. And we're really starting with the fun classes, if you will. So we're changing up like PE and stuff. We're not running laps and stuff. We're going to do native traditional games and things like that, just kind of a little bit more engaging way. We're going to do culture camp. Really, we're focusing on the elective classes. A lot of times that's where kids get caught up. They get stuck on those elective classes. They didn't quite finish those courses, and that's a lot of times what I've found, especially with our homeless kiddos, because of attendance. That's what prevents them sometimes from graduation. So we're actually focusing a lot on art and photography. We're gonna do some American Indian studies and things like that to just make school fun. And I always talk about the F word in education. It always freaks everybody out when I'm giving a presentation because I say that. But the F word in education is fun. I don't think that school should ever be a place where kids have to come and just serve time, right? Because they're going to be bummed out, and then when they're bummed out or in a bad mood, then teachers like, well, this does suck. And we just want it to be fun. We want it to be engaging. We want kids to want to come to school and be excited about it.
I like that emphasis on electives because, particularly over the summer, you want school to be fun, but you were also really kind of struggling with, like you said, helping students to catch up for what they might have missed. So you kind of get a twofer. You get to have fun, do a class that doesn't even sound like a class. I mean, photography, that sounds amazing. It sounds like just this terrific enrichment experience, but you're also going to get credit for it. So,
Absolutely.
And then you're keeping them engaged so that they keep coming in the fall too.
Yeah. And of course, too, we are offering credit recovery in science and all of the core classes as well. But just give them the option. Let them decide what they want to do.
Yeah, that's great.
Let the kids tell us what they need.
Yes, isn't that an interesting idea? Let them tell us what they need. Yeah, a lot of them, they know even when they're very young. I think sometimes we think, oh, the young children don't know, but a lot of times they do. They really do. I'm going to jump into our questions pane. We have quite a few questions. Please type in more questions for Jordann, but I'll get started on some of the ones that we have here in our questions pane. So first question, what has been helpful for you in creating student-led goals? Like you just said, let them tell us what they need. So can you tell us a little bit more about the mechanics of how you help help work with students to create student-led goals? And then how do you kind of get other staff to buy into this? Because there's always going to be some staff who are a bit more traditional or who sort of think, that's just not how we're supposed to do it. We don't do it that way. So it's kind of a two-part question. How do you work with the students to create their goals? And then how do you work with the rest of your team to value those goals and to work towards them together in partnership with the student?
Yeah, well, okay. This is recorded, so I gotta but I just get
Take a minute.
anger me, but like the thought of like other people opposing things that I want to do. I'm very fortunate. I have a very great school board. I have very great administration that's very open. A lot of times they're very progressive, and when people hear the word progressive, they automatically think liberal. No, progressive means evolving and changing, and they're willing to try things. So I will say this for other educators who, you need to find a nice way to say it to other educators. If what we were doing and if this structure and this regimen was the answer and it worked, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would have 100% graduation rate and everything would be fine. And we would walk off into the sunset and there would be fun music playing in a rainbow, okay? It's not working and it hasn't worked yet. Why are we still trying the same things for 100 years if it's not completely working? So if you can find a nice way to wordsmith that, that's really the conversation that needs to happen. But for student goals, we do things a little bit differently. So actually, students and parents come in, they meet with me, they meet with my director, and they meet with the principal. And we sit down and have a conversation with them. And we truly ask them, what are your hopes and dreams? What do you want to do? What do you want to do with your life, right? And so we start with the big picture. And I also do a project where even though I have high schoolers, they draw it. I have them make kind of like a vision, if you will. And then we start backwards and we say, okay, so how do we get there? These are the little things that we need to do to get to this big picture. but really,
Great.
really listening to them, really having a listening session, and really also asking them, what are your barriers? What's not working for you? What doesn't work for you in school? What things do you need more help with?
That's great. That's really helpful. I just want to follow up on that because we got a couple of similar questions. So I'm just going to follow up on this. When you kind of pitch this to educators, do you have any specific examples of any time that, it was hard to get the educators to buy in? And was there any particular messaging or any particular thing that you found really helped help them understand why doing things differently and why particularly, McKinney-Vento students might need something different? It's about equity. It's not about equality.
Absolutely. So, you know, make sure that you have a strong team and you have the same vision. It doesn't really matter what outsiders have to say a lot of times, because it's not about them, it's not about their opinions, it's about the kids. And if it's good for kids, then the answer is yes. And I sounded really smart there. We have a poster in our offices that say that, so I can't take credit for that. But really just having those conversations, I think that data is very helpful. I think if you can provide, dropout rate data, if you can provide, as awful as this sounds, suicide rate data, I think is very eye-opening to folks.
Yeah.
And I know that's not something that we want to talk about, but people really like to see data and they like to see it on paper. And I did have, pushback when I first started the program. And it's a team, it's not just me. That's very important. It's not just me when we first started this program, but people really started to come around when they saw that it worked, when they saw success. We started immediately tracking the units. Units is what we call it at our school, like assignments, the units that students were earning per week, and just getting them back on track. And that really allowed more people to get on board and say, this is a good idea and it's worth it. And they got to know the students too. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stereotypes in our community about American Indian people and American Indian children, and it's really just about not playing into those stereotypes, not buying into those stereotypes, but showing students how they can be successful.
That's super helpful, Jordann. Thank you. We have a question because we've been talking a lot about students and your work with students, but what about parents? Are parents involved, and how do you engage parents? And I know that can be different, by the family, but in general.
Absolutely. So students, my students are from all over the place. Some of them live with their parents, some of them don't, and that's okay. I just try to make sure that the first phone call that I make home isn't a negative one, right? Guardians or whoever, they know when their kid isn't at school. Like they know because they're at home and they see them with their eyes. But just really establishing positive relationships. I also did something where I make like little cards. I just went and got like from Target these blank cards, and I write a good note home to whoever that they want to give it to, and just tell them, hey, you know what, Johnny's doing a really great job. He's had a really good attitude. Just find that one positive and just always make and so that way, if you do have to have a hard conversation or you do have to have a negative phone call, you've established that positive relationship already, so they know that they can trust you. We try to do and host a lot of community events. We had a carnival scheduled last year, but we've done like community feeds and like dinners and stuff where parents come in to the school, so it's no longer a scary place. It like removes that barrier a little bit, so they don't have to feel uncomfortable, because most of the time, again, like that phone call, when parents or guardians have to go into the school, it's not for a great reason. And so we just try to really establish school as a comfortable place for everyone to be.
It's really important. We're coming up on the end of our time here, but and we have a few questions that I'm not going to be able to get to, and I apologize. We always run out of time, but I do want to ask you this last one because I know you're going to have a lot to say about it. You talked about how students and parents, they don't want to talk about their homelessness. They're afraid, they might be embarrassed, and I'm sure, particularly for you, working in the community that you work in, there's also this whole history of cultural trauma where schools were, you know, essentially a tool for cultural genocide against Native Americans. And so you have a lot of different dynamics playing out. So the question that somebody submitted here is, how do you explain to a family or student what their rights are under McKinney-Vento, and because they're experiencing homelessness, that's simple enough, you know, straight to the point so they understand, but that's not offensive and that's not scary?
Absolutely. You know, I just really try to first establish a positive, safe relationship, a trusting, you know, relationship with them. And then it's really just, it's really hard to navigate, and I get it, because it's shameful for them, and they internalize that, and they feel like, you know, they're less of a person, or they're not a good parent. But, you know, things happen. And so just establishing that positive relationship and saying, these are the services that we can provide you. Remember that hopes and dreams conversation, and you told me that you want to go to college? Perfect. I have an excellent program for you. I have excellent resources. Let's make it happen.
Wow, yeah, connecting it specifically to something that they have said is important to them as a goal for them. That really makes sense.
Do it. Let's yeah, you know. If folks also have questions for me too, and they're just like dying to hear what I have to say about anything, could you provide them with my email, that brighttraileducation@gmail.com? I'm sorry,
Typing it in right now.
I am technologically stunted, and I don't even see the chat box.
No, that's fine. And you might not be able to. I'm gonna
Okay.
brighttraileducation@gmail.com. Okay, I just put that
Yeah.
into the chat box.
Oh,
Hopefully.
it's brighttrailed@gmail.com.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to take up more of time, but I thought
No,
maybe that
it's
might be more
perfect.
helpful to folks too.
Yeah, I'll bet that you might be getting some emails. Okay, so I just put the correct one in there, brighttrailed@gmail.com.
Mhm.
And I also put in the chat box a link to some of our upcoming webinars, because we have a few coming up that I think, based on the questions I've seen in the chat, will be responsive, I think, to some people's questions. So I went ahead and put that in there too. But I always promise to keep people only for a half an hour, so I am gonna wrap up now. But Jordann, I just want to thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your passion. I really enjoyed talking to you, and to everyone who participated, thank you for your time as well. I know we're all very busy, so I appreciate having a half an hour of your day.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you again for having me. It was an honor.
Yeah. All right, well, have a good day, everyone. Thanks again. We'll see you next week. Bye.